Hello and welcome back to Inspirability. We are back for Series 3. Today is episode 2 and I'm interviewing not one but two guests, Paul and David Winstanley.
So let's talk a little bit about the influences you had growing up. I understand your mum was a real powerhouse of a woman, so tell me a bit about her.
To the boss. Yeah, when we grew up, I mean, I can remember 10, I would go home first. Our gran, my father's mother, lived just around the corner. And Mum was working. Mum was a practice manager. So all we ever knew, can't speak on behalf of Paul, but all we ever knew was Mum worked.
Working
and was highly regarded and was having her by the doctors.
She had her own career.
Yeah. And she'd worked damned hard for that. So you're talking early 70s, really.
Mm-hmm.
And that might not sound remarkable now, but she was bringing up 3 boys and she was running the household. Let's not be funny about it. And she was working hard. So we kind of just thought, oh, that's the norm. That's how normal families operate. Both the mother and the father work and they both pull their weight. They both get pensions. But when you look at it now and reflect on just what Mum achieved and Dad, but yeah, Mum's had a huge influence on us and does now at 91. It's I don't know, matriarchal family.
Yeah, she was the one that kind of kept us all together, really. And we had a few wobbles, as any family does. I think my dad was genuinely disappointed that none of us went to university.
Whereas I think all 3 of us are quite relieved.
We're quite relieved, but don't get me wrong, I think my dad was fiercely proud of everything the 3 of us had done, as my mum is. But my mum was the one who said, kept everybody, it's their life. They've got to live their life. When we've had problems in our life domestically, it's always been Mum that's been there for us. She's been, she's like every other.
And she keeps you grounded. But, she's good.
Grounding for
just when you think she looked impressed, but she wouldn't say, wow, I'm impressed.
Yeah.
She'd go,
look. She never lets you get too big for your boots. She always reminds you where you come from. She's fiercely proud of her own history. She's from Ireland. She's from Dublin. She's fiercely proud of her parents and they were brought up still very loyal to aunties and uncles, isn't it, in Manchester. So she's, they go around there every Sunday or they all get together, so really close-knit family. But she was definitely, she still is inspirational. But when you do look back at that time, she had her own career as a practice manager. And it used to annoy me is that when I used to go shopping with her after school, everyone would say hello to her and go, who's were they? Right. And obviously through the practice, she knew loads of people. But yeah, she was, and we saw it when my dad died, the community spirit up there is brilliant. And a lot of that is just down to how my mum is, so, but I have no worries about my mum being where she is at all.
No, because the community around is brilliant. What I would recommend to anybody, if you've got an elderly parent or an elderly, you've got iPhones now, just take them. I spent 3 hours just chatting to Mum about her experiences in Ireland. And I told Mum, I'm just going to put the tape, because I'll never remember this, Mum. I need to say tape record. I'm going to record on the iPhone, just chat. And 3.5 hours had passed. And she was talking about her grandmother being held at gunpoint by the IRA and loads of things happening in Dublin and an auntie and uncle who got caught in a crossfire. He panicked, proposed, realised that he shouldn't have proposed. And there's all these stories that when you relate and you look at your own mother living those, you realise why she brought us up as she did. So she was baptised and christened in both Roman Catholic and the Church of Ireland churches. So she made a choice that when we were of that age, we would make a choice about our relationship with religion because Mum had gone through that. So she said, that's it. You're 11. You make your own mind up what you want to do. Because I think Mum was hours old when her Catholic grandmother lifted her out of the crib, took her downstairs to make sure she was at least the first experience was a Catholic church. I think I might be exaggerating. 2 or 3 days later, Church of Ireland grandmother comes in, does exactly the same.
That's where I get my rebellious streak from, I think.
In those days, it was a mixed marriage. It was a Protestant and Catholic marriage, which in Ireland was very rare. So those are the stories that I think form part of our characters.
And I think she, again, since my dad's gone, she's still in the same house I was born in. In fact, you were born in it as well.
I was born in here.
So they were both born in that house. And my mum's still in it. But every now and again, an envelope will arrive at home, and she's obviously going through all the photographs. And, these photographs is not just necessarily me or Dave or David, because we're talking about my mum. There'll be things written on the back, and there'll be, this is your auntie so-and-so and even the address will be there from Dublin. Now, if I went to Dublin, that house probably doesn't exist. It's probably a hotel or something. But she's got this thing now that she wants us to engage with her past and understand her past. And she does it with the grandkids as well. But the funniest thing, though, is we got her a new phone. And if you ever do a video call with my mum, you never get to see my mum. You get to see her ear, forehead, the car.
Even selfies are a challenge. If you get a selfie, right, then get a printer.
But she's managed to do WhatsApps now, which is a good thing. Which she keep in touch with the grandkids, which I think is foremost more important. Yeah.
Can't remember what she calls it. It's not that
she doesn't call it WhatsApp, but she knows that.
How do you think that shaped you then in terms of the lives that you've now led and decisions you've made and choices you've made, that upbringing, that influence from your mum?
No, I think big thing was this thing about, be honest, be real, be consistent. But, we didn't get that just from mum. I came from dad. And certainly my granddad on my dad's side, I didn't, neither was to Keith saw him, but neither saw granddad McBurnett, which was my mum's mum. But again, you saw influential characters. There's a bloke I never met who was quite influential on me. We learned a lot about what he was like. He had a trade union background. Both also he used to race sailboats, and that's kind of in our blood a little bit as well, about sailing, and probably why Keith went in the Navy. But, obviously not me and Jack McDermott was one thing, but my mum always talked about him. So he was quite an influence on my life through my mum, I guess.
And so you talk about both your grandfathers were in the trade unions. So does that then influence your choices to then come chair Youngest branch?
Yeah, I guess it was always there, yeah. But when I became an air traffic controller, and all I wanted to be was an air traffic controller. I was just blinking. I wanted to get through my college course, get to a unit, check out, start a career. And I did the usual stuff. Became an instructor, became an examiner, which came to run a watch. But it was, I don't know, some light went on halfway through, and I used to sit and moan a lot. In fact, he'd probably tell you I've done it ever since he's known me. I've always had that attitude, not always the best attitude, I'll be honest.
Really?
Yeah.
God, fuck.
And it was when somebody said something to me, basically, you've got to stop moaning, right? Go and do something about it. And that's when I thought, oh, yeah, okay, I can do that. And an opportunity arose to get involved with the union. That's what I did. And I got involved. I was elected chair in 2006, and I've been the chair ever since. So.
And tell me a bit about a previous time when you were opposite sides of the negotiating table, you and your union capacity and David at Birmingham Airport.
Ironically, I've never been a member of a union, despite the fact that you could argue that it's almost been in our blood. But I left the Air Force, tried to run my own business for a year. I admire anybody who can run their own business. You're all in. And that did quite work out. So I started working at Birmingham Airport, and I started as head of compliance and safety, which is not the sexiest job in the world, but it's an important job. Then got promoted to head of security, then ops director, and then COO. But a later on part, we realised that having had an air traffic background, we were at Birmingham at that time, things have changed now considerably, felt we were paying an awful lot for the service we were getting from Nets. We were paying a Rolls-Royce price and getting a Robin-reliant service.
Is one opinion.
Yeah, it's one opinion. It's our opinion, and we were the customer. And that was a challenge for Nets at the time, relating to their customer and listening to the customer. And Paul and I have had long conversations about that. It's changed now. So we're talking some time ago. Cut a long story short, Birmingham elected them to go out to the market. And it was just at the same time that CA were doing a review on whether it's a contestable market or not. That's had their view. The customers had their view. We then went out to market, we didn't get strong enough bids in, which kind of points to the fact that there was challenges in the market. So we boldly elected to do it ourselves and insource and establish Birmingham Airport Air Traffic Limited. But in that process, I was leading it from Birmingham's point of view, and the prospect lead was Paul.
And how was that then, being opposite sides of the table as brothers?
Well, it's quite a funny story, actually, because the marquee was, whether you think it's contestable or not, we could talk for hours about that. But I got, and I'll never forget it, I got a phone call, and it's one of those phone calls where you look at your phone, you go, I probably need to answer that. And
so it wasn't mum or...
No, it wasn't mum. It was Mum, we're related. And one of the bosses in NATS at the time, who was in charge of airport, said, we've just lost the contract at Birmingham. And I went, I thought that was really quite funny, because obviously I knew you were there. And I thought it was a wind-up. And then I found out that no, David had decided to take the Birmingham had decided to take the air traffic control service in-house. And I'm going, ooh, that'll be a challenge. So I'm sat there going, so I'm phoning up my team going, we better get a team together. And I still at that time wasn't actually sure whether this was true, right? It was a wind-up. So I had to do the other thing, which was get hold of him and say, is this true? And he went, yeah, it is true. And I thought, well, this is going to be an interesting dynamic, isn't it? So from an air traffic controller's point of view, and I don't want to sound, I don't want to be an anti-NATS at all. If NATS loses a contract, all I care about is the controllers and the air traffic systems, the engineers at that unit. Almost that's the important thing now, to look after them, their terms and conditions, everything. So we set up this team, and the first time I walked into, I can't remember what your headquarters was called.
Island House.
And apart from the fact that, I'll say this for the record as well, the person who is responsible for your £5 drop-off fees any airport is David, right? Because I found out that the hard way as well, because we got charged £5 for driving around as well, which I've never claimed back of it. That's a true story. He is the man that's responsible for that. But the first time he walked into that thing, it became real. It became the fact that I now sat opposite my brother. He will have his own, quite right, his own agenda about what he needs to achieve. And I'm sat there with my own agenda. And we carry, and the relationship really works. We've got a good track record of working with any of the ANSPs in the United Kingdom anyway. The fact it was my brother made it actually a little bit easier, because we could take away a conversation that might not have been presented in the right way in a formal meeting and go, no, that's not quite what we meant. Or what about if we do this? Or there's a risk if we do this, that might break this. And we got to what I thought was a pretty good settlement for everybody. There was a stage where it got to where it came down to the final knockings of the dotting the I's and crossing the T's, where the right thing to do was step back. So I stepped back a little bit and let other people finish it off. But no, initially I was all over that.
So it actually helped then, you being brothers?
I think huge has. I'm not convinced. Without the brothers being there, you'd have achieved a 5-year freeze on terms and conditions. That level of protection for a new business was quite remarkable. And there were other benefits that, because Paul and I had the discussions. And bear in mind, it wasn't all hands round the campfire singing "Come By Night." If we had some blazing rounds, at the end of the day, you love your brother. So you know he's doing it because he passionately believes that this is the right thing to do, and he's representing the controllers. I want happy controllers because we're trying to blend two together. It was right for Birmingham at the time, but that's some time ago. If I was at Birmingham now, I probably wouldn't be outsourcing air traffic. You'd be getting NATs in, and I believe Birmingham are doing that. So it's gone full circle. It was only ever meant to be for a period of time. But because we were brothers, and I can remember, the restaurant just down the way in Alresford, I can remember starting a meal there, and we were with your colleagues and my colleagues, and for about an hour they didn't say a word, and we were at it, and I mean full on. But at the end of the day, you go, fine, we've flexed our muscle, we put it out there, and because we put it out there, I think we got quite a remarkable result.
Yeah, we had to respond. It wasn't just Birmingham. We lost Edinburgh, Gatwick at one point. They're now back in. Well, Edinburgh's not, but Gatwick's back in the ball. Some of the agreements that you kind of forced to do then in that environment kind of changed the face of some of the agreements we did elsewhere, including with NATS. Because it was a response to a commercial decision. We might approach it from different sides, but we got what was, I think, generally a kind of a win-win for everybody. And there were some of those agreements that we used elsewhere with other contract negotiations. So it was a good learning point for everybody.
We were exploring things that hadn't been discussed. No one had done it. No one had gone and done it in-house on a reasonably large airport before. Yep. Nobody had done that. And even we found when we're talking to NATS lawyers and the union, their understanding of policies that have been in place but not enacted were different. So trust of a promise, we won't go into the detail, trust of a promise was one. It wasn't until you explored that policy, and we did, that people's differing viewpoints go, hold on a minute, I had no idea that's actually what that policy meant, because it had never been exercised. So it was groundbreaking, probably too dramatic, but it was forging, in a certain way, a new ground.
Yeah, it was that ability, I think, to bring some of the agreements we had in place to explain why we got them, what they were designed to do, what they were designed to protect in the first interest, but not always about protection. But even stuff on flexibility, numbers, resilience in a contract. There were lots of things that we were learning as well. Because I don't necessarily move in the commercial sphere, but then sometimes circumstances kind of force you to do that.
And NATS did phenomenally well, because for Birmingham to have transited, we needed NATS controllers to train the new platform controllers, which is quite bizarre. That had never been done before.
Strange.
NATS was very, very supportive. So Birmingham could not have done that transition unless Birmingham came to the table, NATS came to the table, and Prospect came to the table.
But there was a little bit of baggage around, have you encouraged your brother to take it in-house and things like that. There was some of it in jest, some of it was a bit pointed at times. And I go, you clearly don't know David well enough. But, it was just one of those things, really. But, the aviation world is quite a small world, if you know people, don't you?
But it's worked hugely now, because I've come across a lot of Paul's friends and colleagues, even now when I'm talking to NATS about flow rates and capacity, it actually helps.
Yeah. It helps your understanding from...
Yeah, and you can just go, and someone will joke and go, oh, well, you're younger than your brother, yet you've got more grey hair. And you worry then about hair dye and have you seen him in the rain? Which I've never done.
It's outrageous.
But seriously, it helps when you're sat opposite someone talking. If you've got some shared experience, then it just helps those difficult decisions go a lot smoother.
So in terms of managing conflict then, what top tips have you got for our viewers and listeners? David, do you want to start?
Try and take the emotion out of it is the first thing. Think carefully about what you're actually discussing. And 9 times out of 10, you're not in conflict. You're just disagreeing with each other. And that's not a fight. So don't put your hat and coat on for the fight, because that's what you'll get. If you go into a negotiation with an aspect of winning, and by definition, if you win, somebody has to lose, that's not a clever place to start. So remove the emotion, think about what you're actually going to achieve together, and remember that 9 times out of 10, that relationship needs to be maintained for a long period of time. So if you do scar too early and you go for the win, you actually could end up paying the price in relationship further down the line. But you spend most of your life negotiating. So
well, I mean, emotion is really key. I think you've got to take the emotion out of it. You've got to look at what the problem is. You both got to understand what problem you're trying to solve, right? Because if you're not on the same page with that, you're always going to be in trouble, right? So what we try to solve, what are the constraints with both sides got to work in? So I had this thing, walk in their shoes, right? Don't just go in there with a blinkered view. Take time out before you go in, walk in their shoes. What pressures are they under? What do they want out of this? And 9 times out of 10, if you get a joint understanding, and a genuine joint understanding, an open, honest understanding of the problem, you will work out a solution. And I hate this phrasing, in my life, it's got to be a win-win. It doesn't always have to be a win-win, actually. It has to be a fair outcome.
I avoided the phrase win-win.
That bit, yes. And that bit you just said about buying shares in a future disagreement is absolutely key. There will be another, I'm not call it a fight, there's going to be another conflict, another area of disagreement in the future. And if it goes back to your leadership style, if you're consistent and honest and open, that doesn't need to be a conflict. You might still disagree, but it doesn't need to be a conflict.
And I think it's self-evident when we discuss the nets. I was very conscious of the impact for prospect for this happening elsewhere. So there was it would have been futile for me to go, I'm going to grab early ground. I'm going to make sure we get the best deal. Because actually that wouldn't have worked with prospect, because prospect looking at this thinking, well, if this is a waterfall, if Birmingham are the first, what happens to second and third? So Paul's strategic outlook is, I've got to look at how this is going to affect prospect, not just the members at Birmingham. How's this going to affect the whole of our membership? What heroes is, profession. Therefore, if you can just have that in the back of your mind, and it's not easy, then the chances are you're looking at the longer term relationship and not just scoring points, which is just futile.
Most ANSPs have a way of working with a trade union. It's been various guises over the years, participant approach, now working together. If you have a genuine industrial relations climate that's positive, it is better for everybody because, we've done some pretty difficult things. We've closed pension schemes, closed units. These are all affect people. We've done it together, and that's the thing. So it's all about relationship. You build up a relationship, and if the relationship isn't working, it won't work. But it's got to be built on like stuff they were saying, trust, openness. I've signed things as a trade union official, non-disclosure agreements. So if you said to me 5 years ago, would you sign a non-disclosure agreement in a commercial capacity? I'd have left, and no chance would I do that. But sometimes you have to do that because that's the market that you're playing. So everyone has to evolve. And if you're all on the same train, you're all right. It's when you're not on the same train that's the problem. And I think that's all down to relationships. So
let's talk a little bit about overcoming adversity. So you mentioned you ran your own business briefly. So I want to hear that story first. And then, Paul, I want to hear a story from you as well. So tell me a bit about running your own business and how that was coming out of the military.
Well, I had a great partnership with a gentleman, doctor, who was an ex-policeman who'd written a book. And we've met when we did some neuro-linguistic programming training. So my last stint in the Air Force, I was doing leadership training. So we were exploring how you develop the leader for the future. So rather than lessons learned, fight the previous war. And we bumped into each other, and he had this concept of of leadership training and engagement with companies, looking at effectively like a fourth dimension. How do you get people to be comfortable with dealing with ambiguity? Because we're all configured in what certainty. We like certainty. We like ordinal things in life. But what happens when it's all foggy? How can you function in that environment carefully and be comfortable? And we were starting a business, and it actually got to be quite successful. But when it came to scalability, I realized I was selling him and his concept, and he realized that. And when you run your own business, you are all in. It's like poker. But the difference is you don't know you've got a winning hand. So you put everything there. So I went from the military, which was, there's different risks. You could be deployed, as I was, and things like that. But you're not putting your family at risk. You're not putting your home at risk. You're not putting your livelihood at risk. You're not putting your board. I could go on. So I have a lot of respect for people in that environment. So it might not sound adverse to some people, but at some stage I decided that's it. And I quit with nowhere else to go. So I'd left a very successful career, run my own business for a year, was sat at over the living room going, I've got a wife, 2 kids, mortgage, no job.
Facing huge uncertainty about
Nothing.
the future.
And I quit without anywhere to go. Some people could say that was foolish, and Dad did on several occasions. However, it for me was I knew I needed to be single-minded and motivated. And the best way to get motivated is to put yourself in a position that you know you're really uncomfortable with. So that happened. I would never run my own business again. And then leaving the Air Force and the Navy was an interesting one as well, because I wasn't fully committed to the Navy. It was never going to work. And I remember, again, head in hands situation where, I left the Navy and was effectively unemployed. And that's what you'd geared your whole life to. So again, it's what you do.
So when you left the Navy then, did you have a job lined up in the Air Force, or did you leave without anything lined up?
No, I had nothing lined up. I knew I wanted to join the military. And when I was leaving Dartmouth, a very nice Flight Lieutenant Parrish, I think his name was, said, David, do you know what? You're good at this military stuff, but wrong service, man. You're in the Navy, not a good marriage. You should join the Air Force. That seems a good idea. And that was the thought process. And then I had a job at Service Air at Manchester Airport. Very, very important, because that's where I met Lindsay. Gate 23, Air Malta 737, in about 1986. And then very quickly, I applied for the Air Force and walked through Officer Air Crew Selection at Biggin Hill. So you were talking about did you know you were going to end up where you are? I had no idea. And I joined, because everybody joins for air crew, but unlike you and maybe Paul, I never had the passion really to fly. I love aviation, but I didn't have that single-minded thing that you needed in the mid-'80s. If you joined the Air Force and you didn't say, I want to be a single-seat fast jet pilot, you weren't getting it. You weren't getting in. It was, I think they did a fighter pilot program in the 80s. Cut long story short, they said we're desperate short of air traffickers. And I went, that sounds fun, because I knew Paul did it. And by default, ended up, but I walked through the building, Officer Air Crew Selection, that's still there at Biggin there, and it's been restored. So that's quite strange. But yeah, didn't have a job to do, Service Air, joined the Air Force, loved everything.
So in terms of dealing with uncertainty then, when you finished your business or you just left, had nothing to go to, what tips can you give to our listeners about overcoming and dealing with uncertainty?
It's try, this time will pass. The good times pass and the bad times pass. Just accept the fact that there are going to be low times in your life where you're going to have to dig deep. And I can't tell someone what that digging deep is for them. They need to find it. But I think this time you pass. And so the bad times, they will pass. But I think also celebrate the good times. Because when the wind's behind you and you're sailing away and everything's just right and you close your eyes and you go, do you know what? This is just about perfect. Just have in the back of your mind, this too can pass. You know, I don't mean to be fatalist about it, but it keeps you grounded.
Yeah.
Because if you're in that euphoria and everything's going brilliantly, you drop. I fear the drop of that. I fear that drop being worse than the drop of I'm struggling through. I might be wrong. It might be a bigger drop. So in the time between the Air Force and the Navy, or Navy and the Air Force, that was dark. Air Force, no job, run your own job, no, that was difficult. Even leaving Birmingham under the circumstances of my own making, I should say, that was quite difficult because there are trigger points where you've got to start again. So just keep it context specific. This time will pass. So feel what you need to feel, and you can be dark. Look around for the support and friends and family to just remind you what you're good at, that you're a little bit self-worth, because we can all be very hard on ourselves. So that's kind of what has helped me. And it could be, Paul said he likes to talk to other people. I'm thankful that in all but one of those occasions, Lindsay was with me. I'm very, very blessed in that respect. So I've had my best friend and someone I love dearly to help me through it, and just, you know, hand on the shoulder. You're better than that. Or, shouldn't say this bit, my biggest motivator, I'll show you.
Yeah.
I'll show you. And whether that's a positive characteristic of mine or a negative, I have to be frank, it's a huge motivator.
It's a good bouncing back, isn't it?
I'm going to prove a point here. And if someone's not there, I'm going to show you, and I'm going to make a point that you'll know about it. And if you don't, I'm going to make sure you'll know about it.
And Paul, we're talking about overcoming adversity. Are there any times when you've had to overcome adversity that you'd like to share with us?
Loads. I think my biggest one was like when I guess it's part of the competitive nature with my brothers. You know, I'm not going to say I was seen as the black sheep of the family. That's a bit unfair, but when Keith, I will always remember this. But Keith was going to do his naval officer training at Dartmouth, and he came home once and he was talked about being told off for not ironing his shoelaces. And that was a kind of a game changer for me, because I was a bit of a rebel. I'm going, there's no way I could go through officer training. If somebody told me to iron my shoelaces, I'd tell them something different. So I kind of fell into air traffic by accident. I had a friend who took me to the tower at Manchester. I thought, oh, I'm really into this. I'm really into aviation, loved aviation, wanted to fly. But I didn't have the opportunity to fly. So I had a career in air traffic control. Once I was in, I was 100% focused on getting through college. First time I was away from home, 3 years in Bournemouth with various places around the country. Got posting, not to where I wanted to go. So you get a dream sheet at the end, Manchester is what I put. And they sent me to a place called Eastern Radar, which is now closed up in Watton, in Norwich. With a move back down to West Drayton, that was like sending me to Liverpool for them. The greatest respect to people in Liverpool. It was like sending me to the Russian front. It was just I just didn't want to go. I can remember going home and talking to my mum and dad, and they're going, look, this is just short term. You know the unit's going to close. You know you're going to go to West Drayton. West Drayton's a big unit. It's where London Centre used to be. It's now down at Swanwick in Southampton. And I'm sat there thinking, I've worked so hard to get here. I don't want to be here. And I thought, I'm going, what am I going to do? You know, I put all my eggs into one basket. I'm a little bit older than some of the contemporaries around. And all of a sudden, you know, it was that, you know, it's not going to be forever. You know, dust yourself down. Think about, you know, you don't know where you're going to be in 10 years' time. So I then, you know, regrouped, if you like. And then I failed my first validation. So I'd gone through all that. Hire being an air traffic controller, be posted to a place that you wouldn't want to get posted to, away from my mates and my football club and all the things that aren't really that important, if I'm being honest with you. And then I found my first validation, and I thought my world had just ended. And it was phone calls from people who were with me and trained me. And actually, the examiner who failed me was the best phone call I'd got. He goes, Paul, you just had a bad day. You're going to have bad days, right? Pick yourself up, dust yourself down. The rules are then, I think I couldn't retain my validation board for a month. But then I just got up, refocused, checked out, and never looked back, to be honest. And now I look back on that moment in my career where I go, I desperately wanted to go to Manchester, wanted to go home. And it'd have been the worst thing for me ever to go back home. Sending me down to eventually West Drayton and eventually move down here was the best thing for my cadetship. And that was the most difficult time. There'd been all the difficult times, some domestic stuff, but that was the most difficult thing, where you put all your eggs into one basket for a career, had a failure, which I'd not had before. So it was dealing with a failure for the first time and being in a part of the world I didn't want to be in, I'll be honest with you. But, not everyone can deal with this. People deal with things differently. That thing around, you pass shapeshit, definitely. But when things of an adverse nature happening today, it will pass, and tomorrow is a different day. It's a bit like, I was devastated when I lost my dad, but then you begin to remember all the good things about it, and it's things. So things will pass, and what's in the past can't actually hurt you. It's done, it's dusted. You got to move on, and tomorrow's a different day, and who knows what will bring. Because that day, when I failed my board east, and I never thought I'd be an air traffic controller, never thought I'd be where I am today. But right people around you, pick yourself up, dust yourself down.
I think perspective is huge, but I look at what other people have achieved and gone through in their life, and I do often ask myself the question, would I have the internal strength? And I've listened to some of your interviews, and some of the people you've interviewed have done remarkable things. And I think, I'd like to think I would have that courage and strength of character, because it's mountains and molehills, isn't it? One person's mountain, another person.
Yeah, I was on that adverse, really, how they compared to others.
But it's perspective and timing.
Yeah.
At that moment in time, it was devastating to you. And if it's devastating to you, then that is your mountain. Other people, they have different mountains and molehills. But I do often wonder, what would I do if I was in that situation? I'd like to think I'd do exactly the same. I'd dig deep and go, I'll show you. And it would be the same response.
It's sort of that, I think we started off by saying it in the interview that, that shaped my view on how people, train people and the empathy they have with somebody who fails a board or has a particular bad day. Somebody who sails through their training, I'm not set up, clearly they're going to be of a standard. But I don't think they do make the best trainers. I think that the people who make the best trainers are those who've had a bit of adversity, know what it feels like to dust themselves there and go back and do it again and check out.
Kind of back to empathy again, really, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Good leaders, good trainers. Yeah, if you've been through that and you struggled, you know what it's like to struggle. Whereas if you've sailed through it and you might be the best at it, but are you the best teacher?
Even things like, being posted somewhere you don't want to go. Ultimately it's a decision from the business. But, we go full circle now, and this goes back to, family policies, family network support. Should we be recruiting locally to units? So, if you're from Aberdeen, you want to stay in Aberdeen, why aren't we recruiting you to go back to Aberdeen? Because you'll have a network around you that'll provide support, not just with your family, but if you do have a bad day or, you do have other health issues, you've got a network around you rather than establishing a network somewhere else.
Yeah, that's fascinating, that network thing, because if you look at the three of us, we bomb burst out. We moved away from Manchester all at the age of 18. That affects your support network. So we had to build our own sustainable networks that were outside of our family network. We didn't go back to Manchester. In the same respect of you recruiting from the local community, that has strength. It's because we try and emphasize the fact that we are a local airport. And if you don't relate to the community you're in, then you can't recruit from that. You can't identify with it. So I like that idea of trying to attract local people, not purely because of logistics, but from the mental health support network.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we don't know whether it's going to work, but it's one of the things that we're actively looking at. And certainly when you think about support networks for families, I think it's fine at Pry. I know we left Manchester, but there's a lot of people who do like to be in the locality where they're grown up. So yeah, we'll see.
So just talking about family-friendly policy, something we touched on previously was menopause support.
Yes.
Which you're implementing at Biggin Hill. So can you tell us a little bit about menopause support and what you're doing?
Yeah.
Why you're doing it as well?
I think, those of us in a certain time periods of our lives are in relationships that you both go through those challenges. And Lindsay won't mind me saying that she went through menopause. So having an appreciation at home and how difficult that was for Lindsay, then if you then magnify that in a work environment where, and it's not just hot flushes, there's mental fog, there's stress, there's fatigue, there's a whole range of symptoms. And if employers are going to be truly valuing diversity and inclusivity, then you need to I talked about making the environment where everybody can excel, then that has to be in every asset. So yes, we have menopause policies so that people can be aware. Someone can independently change temperature. Someone's too warm and someone's too cold, then put a top on.
Have you tried the simulators as well? Because we had something at Burke where the men were wearing simulators, not in the aircraft, but on the ground, the office staff.
We've not done that. I'd be fascinated to do it, right? And I think that would work well because once you've seen it from a different perspective. But I think we were talking before about this whole range. So making sure that all of your policies allow both men and women to adapt to the life they find themselves in has got to work. And
I think the policies are, I don't understand blasé. I think most progressive companies now have got policies. I still think that they're missing this bit about talking about it. So great, we've got a policy. Great. What does it actually mean? How do we make those policies real? Do people really understand what it means to people? I think there's still a little bit of a gap, talking from a NATS perspective. There's a little bit of a gap there. But, most of the companies that I know or work with have all sorts of policies now because it's the right thing to do. But whether there's still a piece missing on education a bit, I still think there's a little bit of work.
I wouldn't disagree with you. I think right to do is an interesting one. Businesses have to do it though. And I don't just mean businesses. Any organization has to do this because if you diverge away from the society for which you recruit, you're automatically building attention. So if you look at the way people live their lives, your policies should be the other way around. You shouldn't be making business policies and looking to people to conform. The absolute opposite is true. The business needs to relate policies to society, and also not wait for legislation. Because the assumption our government is going to jump ahead and make all the right calls, any government for that matter, assuming they're going to make the right calls, is actually not valid.
Someone's got to lead it.
You know the environment. You know your bit of business better than anybody else. We know our business and our teams better than anybody else. I don't need the government or the legislators to come around and tell me what policies work or what don't work. Why don't I just enact them myself? As long as they're not against the law or not against appropriate policies and procedures or regulation, then use that flexibility, use the ambiguity and turn it to your advantage.
Yeah, there's a risk that we have a policy for policy's sake. So you've got to make a policy real. It has to have an impact on people. People got to understand what it means, what it means to somebody. Without that, you've got a missing piece.
Yeah, you've got to. And part of that is about communicating to your own teams. But if you're listening to your team and they're driving the policy, it's almost, you've got exactly the education you were talking about, Paul. Because it's your workforce, your colleagues, educating the business about what policies
and themselves.
Yeah.
And also, if you've got these policies, then you're also perhaps improving recruitment from people from diverse sectors, or say increasing the number of women in aviation, for example. If you've got maternity policies, menopause policies, breastfeeding policies, more women will feel that that's a career available to them. One thing we did talk about before was about women, they're on boards and recruiting women on boards. So can you tell us about an experience that you've had with women applying or not applying for roles?
Yeah, there's a specific example, and I know my current ops director won't mind me saying it. When my first exec appointment was with the ops director, and I asked the recruitment agency that I would like as diverse a pool as possible, and if you could get me a strong female candidate, then that would work well. And what they fed back to me was there were candidates available, but in the vast majority of cases, they didn't believe they met all the essential criteria. And then I know there's been a debate about whether when a woman looks at a job, if they can't fulfill all the essential criteria, they won't apply. I have nobody filling all the essential criteria.
So no male or female.
Yeah. So there was almost a self deselection prior to even applying. So it wasn't the system deselecting. It was an individual looking at that job going, I couldn't possibly just apply, get the job and learn on the job. And if we're all honest, I know very few people who start a job, hit the floor running, and already know it. I did not know everything about being a CEO when Andrew offered me the job. We both agreed I would learn aspects of those skills on the job. So if we can remove the gender aspect and realize that actually everybody learns on the job to a certain degree, then I'm not sure essential criteria is the right way forward. I think we need to think carefully about how we're advertising. How do we sell the job? Because I should be selling my job better so that women can look at it and go, I can nail that. Or it's not just about the clinical job, it's about the environment. What does this business offer me that other businesses don't, where I got a higher chance of succeeding, where the environment might be more supportive, might be more willing to allow me to excel in that job over a period of time? And all of those aspects, I think, could lower some barriers.
There's some support there, and we're not expecting you to hit the ground running and know everything.
I'm not expecting anybody.
So there were still men that had applied for this role, even though they didn't.
And they didn't meet the essential criteria.
Did the recruiter go back to any of the women and say, well, nobody meets it, so why didn't you apply?
So we eventually, the lady who chose not to, did apply and we interviewed. Then it comes on to best person for the job. So we're a talent-based organisation. What I will do is I'll look at the best person for the job and I'll make an informed decision. There are other attributes that I would look at. I'll close my eyes and I'll say, and I often do when we're doing recruiting, I close my eyes and think, will this person fit to my organisation? Will this person like working with us? Because it's got to be a two-way thing. You can't just say, well, we like you. The interviewee's got to turn around and go, well, hold on a minute, I'm not sure I like you. What else are you going to offer me? It's not just about the salary, it's package, it's how am I going to be treated and valued?
So Paul, what do you think we can do to increase diversity of applicants? Because if we're going to get the best person for the job, we need to increase the pool of people applying and not have anybody self-deselecting in the first place.
That's a really difficult question. When I reflect on, so we've got about 29% females as operational controllers. I might be slightly out with that. And if you compare us with some of the other, like the Americans, the Canadians, the Aussies, we're probably higher. I think the only one that beats us is the Kiwis, but there's only about 350 controllers in New Zealand, so it's a bit of not quite the same. I think we've got all the family-friendly policies in place. I think there's two things for me. One is, it's touching on a little bit what you were saying. I think people have fallen out a bit for love with aviation, maybe because of COVID. They saw last in, first out type thing. I think we're seeing a bit of that at the moment, and that's across all genders. I don't think we're short of people applying. We're probably short of quality. And I think the problem we've got is, I don't know how you necessarily, we can have a conversation about flexible working, agile working. And there is a balance to that about the number of people you can do that within an operation. But essentially, our operation is 24/7, 365. So we need people who are going to do it all the time. And there's a downside of working shifts. It's nights, it's afternoons or weekends when you want to see the kids. It's Christmas Day. I think there's an education piece around telling people what the job actually entails and giving them an honest opinion around what a flexible working pattern or an agile working pattern could look like. Now, don't be wrong, there are other things you could do. You'd have to be an operational ATCO, you could go into safety or something like that, as you've done. I just think the balance has to be right, and I'm not sure we talk about that balance enough. So, but it's again, I guess it comes full circle to what you were saying. It's that piece about explaining to people what it is you're actually coming into and what you can be offered, because you're not going to be necessarily offered something that is your nirvana. There will be a compromise somewhere. So I think that's the key at the moment.
We've also got to inspire more. So if you look at what's happening with elite women's sport, it's kind of gone off the scale. It's brilliant. You watch it. There's far more exposure to it. So we partnered with Bromley Women's and Girls Charity Federation to sponsor them. And then we've just become the shirt sponsor for Bromley Women's Football Club. Why? Because we want a direct connection between elite sport, female elite sport, and aviation. Teamwork, communication, organisation, allocation of priorities. All of the things that I'm seeing in women's sport relate, I think, directly to most businesses, but also aviation. So what we're trying to do with the women's football team is make a direct correlation, so that success for us would be having one of the women working at the airport in apprentice scheme or working full-time and playing football. That has got a great connectivity, because the young girls then go watch these teams play football. And what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm in aviation. Oh, wow. So I can play football and I can be in aviation. Changes the mindset. Just a different way of trying to solve a problem. Nothing might happen, I don't know. But if we get just one more than we had.
I mean, don't think we're short of women in aviation. So, so if you take NAS, our COO is a woman, the head of airports is a woman. Again, whether we are, it's not the same as being a professional sportsman, is it? But whether we are showing the female community that, you do have those opportunities to do that, like yourself and Shona as captains, I don't know. Are we telling everybody that that's their opportunities out there? I don't know.
Visible role models, visually, right? So we're saying about having, a disabled or wheelchair user, there's no traffic controller, that it's possible, but there aren't any. And so it just takes one.
Absolutely. Yeah. It all starts to break down the barriers.
Yeah, absolutely. Just break down the barriers.
So I'm not sure I've really answered your question, but I think it's quite a complex question to answer.
I've got one last question for both of you. What would you tell your 20-year-old self?
John, that is a really good question. Some obvious ones like don't support Man United and be prepared for bad days. I think that, in all seriousness, I think it's that bit about making a mistake, or, you're going to have a bad day. Life isn't always a bed of roses. Learn from your past, accept you can't change it, and live for tomorrow.
Damon, what about you? What would you tell your 20-year-old self?
I trust yourself.
Trust yourself.
Trust your gut. You'll get through it. Just dig deep and trust you, because you know yourself better than anybody else. So look inside, then look outside and get the help and support. But just trust yourself. It'll work out.
Wonderful. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation today. You've both been so inspiring. It's also been very interesting to hear slightly different takes on things as well. So thank you for your time, and thank you for all your inspiration. I'm sure our viewers are really going to enjoy this episode. And I look forward to chatting with you both again soon.
Thanks very much. Really enjoyed it.